Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to introduce Teresa Laina, author of the bestseller, Be the Go-To, How to Own Your Competitive Market, Charge More, and Have Customers Love You for It. She's a recognized Silicon Valley thought leader and strategist and has been involved in education and outreach at Stanford University since 2006. She's also worked with dozens of companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, Nike, Disney, SAP, Verizon, and more. She started her career at Accenture, where she helped to grow a now multi-billion-dollar business unit within that company. We are so excited, and I'm so honored to be introducing Teresa Laina to the Women Transforming Technology Conference. Okay, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's such a lovely introduction, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you confirm that you can see it okay?
I can see it, yeah.
Great. Okay, so I wish I could see all of your lovely faces, and I hope you'll get a lot out of this today. I'm going to give you just a kind of a quick master class on how to go out and establish yourself as the go-to, whether it's inside your company or if you have a company, it could be inside your industry, or to establish yourself as the go-to as a company in your industry. So it's interesting. The reason I kind of got into all of this is actually it was taking acting classes in my 20s. So during the day, I was working for Accenture, very buttoned up at the time, a very buttoned up, formal management consulting environment. And at night, I'd go hang out with my wild and crazy friends in acting classes. And every now and then for fun, I'd go to auditions and I'd show up and I would just be part of the pack. And I realized that there was no way I could stand out in these kind of, audition environments. And it really got me thinking, because at the same time we were running into this in business, especially once I left Accenture and opened, hung out my own shingle and started a consulting firm. And one day I was on the phone with a colleague and she was telling me that her friend was making $50,000 a day doing exactly the same thing that we were doing. And I was incredibly envious and also unbelievably inspired, because I thought, wow, how in the world is she doing that? How can she be commanding such high fees and prices compared to us when we actually have more experience and more credentials? So that really got me looking at, why is it that certain people do stand out as the clear leader, either in the company or in their fields, to command higher salaries, higher fees, while others struggle to get noticed? And I realized that the fundamental problem is that up close, we all look very unique, just like a snowflake. And yet when you step back, of course, we're just part of the snowpack. You don't notice any of the individual snowflakes. And the real issue turned out to be a lack of clear, sustainable differentiation that can set us apart in the minds of the audience or in the minds of people in our company. And what happens is, if you're part of the pack, if you're a commodity, whether you are one of a bazillion Python coders or you're one of a bazillion digital marketing experts, what happens is, over time, as your field fills up, you can charge less and less for what you do. And over time, your salary or your fees eventually go down as more people enter the space. And so then the question, and in doing my research, my question became, well, what do we do about this? What's the answer? And I came to realize, in talking to many companies, many executives, and even in codifying and reflecting back on what I had been part of earlier in my career, I realized that really what you want to do is aim to be the go-to in your space. And so then that begs the question, well, what does that really mean? What is a go-to? And so you want to think of it as that first name that comes to mind when you think of a particular area. People start to seek you out once you've become the go-to. You're not having to fight to get attention. Also, no one can actually deliver on the problem the way you can. Nobody can bring the kind of expertise and solution and results that you can deliver. And then over time, your stellar reputation starts to precede you, so that people start hearing about you before they've even met you. And then eventually you rarely, if ever, have to compete for opportunities, and you come to be known as the best and work with the best. So this is what, and also you can name your price, which of course is the big payoff. So then the question becomes, well, okay, if we want to become the go-to, we want to achieve all those outcomes so that people start seeking us out. What's the strategy? What should I be trying to do to become the go-to? So I'll give you the strategy in just sort of a couple of sentences here, but then I'm going to walk you through just the high level, 50,000 foot view on 4 key things that really need to happen to implement this. So the strategy is you choose an urgent, critical market problem that you are going to own. And then you offer a unique solution that's so focused and effective that you become known as the only one to go to for that particular issue. And you deliver this really high value. And in doing that, you're able to set the market agenda. The right prospects actively seek you out, and you get paid well for the value you deliver. So what happens is if you become a go-to, even while others in the market struggle, even as the market fills up with other people who do the same thing or similar things, you really stand out, and your salary, your fees, your prices go up over time instead of going down like everybody else. So there's a huge payoff. So the how, so we wonder, well, how do you implement this strategy? So I did, in trying to answer this even for myself, I looked back at what we did with Accenture. I had joined as just another consultant when I was young, and eventually had the opportunity to go help build a brand new industry practice within the company. So we were a startup within an existing company, and we were breaking into the telecommunications industry, which was not welcoming for a company like Accenture at that time. We weren't a telecommunications company. We weren't one of them. We were an invader, an outsider, and we really had to fight hard to break in and be accepted, much less to become the go-to for a particular area. Likewise, having grown up in the area where a lot of the research and development was done for the Apollo space program, I was very aware of the Apollo 11 and what was involved in putting that together. And then I also went and did a bunch of homework, and I realized that there are actually a lot of parallels between what it took to put a man on the moon and what we need to do to become the go-to. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but even as I got deeper into my research, the parallels became more and more striking. And so I decided to actually call the methodology that I put together the Apollo method for market dominance, in honor of that incredible achievement and what happened over the course of that actually it was less than 10-year period that they spent on the program. So there are 4 key phases: launch, ignite, navigate, and accelerate. And I'm going to quickly walk you through each one and just hit the highlights. Obviously, my book, which Rachel mentioned early in my introduction, my book goes into all the details on this. So I wrote the book intentionally as almost like a user manual. So step by step, and you can easily just go do what it says. And almost everything you need to know is in there. But just to hit the highlights, so the first step is launch. And here you're launching yourself into the market. So you start by articulating a vision for what you think needs to happen, whether that's how to improve a certain process within your company, how to incorporate more diversity into your company, or a particular area that you work in your company, or to make product improvements, or whatever it may be, or likewise for your industry. And you declare a unique approach to solving a market problem that you want to own. So this becomes your moonshot. It's where you say to yourself, what do I want to own? What do I want to live, breathe, and eat, at least for the foreseeable future, so that I understand this problem better than anybody else. I have researched it better than anybody else, and I really want to own it and be the one people turn to for it. And you figure out what your point of view is. So you identified some common critical problem no one else is adequately addressing, and you develop a point of view and a unique approach, and then you launch this into the market. So you basically announce that you want to own this issue, and that could be with a talk, with an article. Internally, it could be with a blog post for the employee blog, or it could be a LinkedIn article or a white paper, whatever it may be. So just to give you a quick analogy with the Apollo space program, the Russians were beating the US. This is in the late 50s, and we were in the Cold War. So there was a bit of a clash between communism and the free world. And the Russians in space kept incrementally beating us. So we would try to have one accomplishment. We were aiming for this and they would beat us. And we would then aim for the next accomplishment, they'd beat us. And so finally, Kennedy said to Johnson, what will make us clearly win the space race? And that's when they decided that, you know what, if we send a man to the moon, this huge accomplishment over where we are today, but if we send a man to the moon and bring him home alive, we will have won the space race. And so that's what they declared. And that's where that phrase moonshot comes from, which I'm sure many of you have heard. An example that's a little closer to home in terms of timing, although this is it's been many years now, but there was a time, believe it or not, when Oprah Winfrey was part of what they called, or what she called, the trash pack. It was still Jerry Springer and Ricky Lake and Montel Williams back in the 90s and late 80s. They had these talk shows where they would just get down and dirty. And finally, Oprah said, no, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I want to start a new trend with talk shows where people are very positive and we focus just on inspirational content. And that's when she shifted her focus. A lot of people thought it was going to kill her show and that it was a huge risk, but she was very adamant about it. And of course, we know what happened from there. She was a massive success. So she really set herself apart. So the first step you can take is to pick a problem. Pick something that you want to focus on. With the people that I help teach in the Stanford Business School Executive Ed program, these are executives who have, full-time positions, and they make decisions. I want to go help women in my organization. I want to improve our rollout process for new products. I want to help, increase diversity in my company. And so they pick a problem and they focus on that and really become known in their area. So the next phase is the ignite phase. And this is where you've decided what you want to be known for. Now you're going to go make a name for yourself. So you want to ignite the market around your point of view. So you're not talking about yourself, you're talking about the problem and your point of view on what needs to be done about it. So you want to rally influencers around the approach and build momentum. And here it's really important to exude that passionate conviction for what you're talking about. So to do this, you become an industry player, meaning you join trade organizations, you become active on committees, you get involved, same within the company, you convert influencers and power brokers. So it's not a matter of quantity here, it's a matter of quality. If you get even 5 key power brokers in your company behind you and what you're trying to do, it will really propel you in terms of becoming known in this space and getting invitations to participate. You also want to propagate your point of view and convert innovators, those early thinkers who are going to get behind you with what you're trying to do. So the way the Apollo space program did this is they turned the astronauts into real people and made them very approachable. So this is way, of course, before social media, but they had Life magazine, which was kind of a photo version of People magazine. And they had pictures of people's backyard, astronauts having barbecues together and pictures with their children. And it really humanized them. So they turned the astronauts into spokespeople for the program. So what you want to do, and so examples here. So Whitney Wolfe Herd, who started Bumble, they began by just going around on college campuses and getting sororities and fraternities to start using the service. And then, of course, we know Greta Thunberg, how she has really made a name for herself around the environment and climate change. And we've all watched that progress in the news. And it's a great example of how you can do that. So then the third step is navigate. And with this, you're trying to guide customers or your colleagues along the journey with you. So it's one thing to have an opinion. It's another thing to see, okay, here's what needs to be done about it and go tout it to the world. But you're not going to actually affect meaningful change if you don't deliver results. And of course, that's what people care about. So here you have to walk your talk. So you're implementing your approach with the right people and delivering results, whether that's customers or possibly, customers within the company, but you're making things happen. So one of your goals is to come up with some solution, some ability to, some answer to the problem that's so impactful that it makes the right people say, holy cow, we have to have that. So that's really what you're aiming for, is you want something that's incredibly impactful, that delivers outcomes for people and really shifts them from problem to achieving results. So you want to, here, it's all about delivering on your promises and providing some kind of complete solution, not functions and features. So if you have a company, you don't want to be in a functions and features arms race with another software provider or another service provider or product provider. You want to come up with the whole solution, the whole package, the whole kit, and deliver those results. And then part of that is building a community of believers. So once you have people out there realizing the results that you're delivering, then you get those believers on board and create a sense of community among them. And not only do they share and participate with each other, but they also go out and amplify your message to the rest of the world or the rest of your environment. So, an example of a complete solution in the Apollo space program is this wasn't just about finding a rocket that would take some guys to the moon and bring them home. It was much more complex than that. And there had to be a total solution approach. They had to figure out, what are these people going to wear? How are they going to use the bathroom in space? How are they going to clean themselves? What are they going to eat? Once they get to the moon, how are we going to teach them to become geologists and collect rock samples and do the science that has to happen? Most of these guys were pilots. So they had to become scientists and knowledgeable about much more, how to operate computers and all kinds of things that they weren't used to. Now, in a real world example, now we have Ann Wojcicki, who put together 23andMe with some co-founders. And at the time, this was rather revolutionary to the idea of bringing the DNA testing to the masses and letting just anybody find out the makeup of their DNA and what that might be telling them about their ancestry and about their health. So she really did something very new and different in introducing this offering, and it's a total solution because it's not just a test and some random test results. You actually find out sometimes that you have relatives somewhere. The fourth phase is accelerate. So this is where you have to be ready to change and stay ahead of everybody else, because you've got to watch your back, because if you're doing something really unique and special, other people are going to come along and want to be like you. So you've got to make sure you're watching what's going on in the market, you're anticipating changes, you're refreshing the vision and picking up speed as you go along. And so what's important here is you want to build loyalty with the people who are believers in what you're doing, those power brokers and influencers and early adopters of what it is you're doing. You want to constantly watch the trends and watch for changes and stay out ahead of everybody else. So with the Apollo space program, of course, they didn't stop at Apollo 11. They went on to do additional missions. So even if another country or had been planning to send someone to the moon, the Apollo space program stayed so far out ahead that nobody else really bothered. And then, of course, they shifted their philosophy later to one of cooperation, which is when they moved to the International Space Station and made this not just about one country, but about the whole world. An example I love is Tina Seelig, who's a very good friend of mine. She wrote this wonderful book called What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. She's a creativity and innovation expert at Stanford. And this was a very successful book. There are lots of people out there who talk about creativity and innovation. So she was always coming out with new books and new research and new methods and techniques to stay ahead of the pack. And she has presented to royalty. In fact, she just had another interview with the Crown Prince of Norway the other day. She has spoken at the World Economic Forum. She's given TED Talks. She's very widely respected and has truly become a go-to in her field. So this is the quick Cliff Notes version of the Apollo method for market dominance, and the 4 things you need to do to really establish yourself as a go-to on a sustainable basis. People do this all day long, and in kind of a they're gone in a poof, because they might get a lot of recognition really quickly, but then they kind of die off and it's not sustainable. But to be sustainable, you really have to do all 4 of these things. I have done a lot of research on this and looked at a lot of companies and a lot of individuals, and realized that when they skip one of the steps, it's very difficult to sustain it as competition comes along for mind share or true competition. But I hope you'll take inspiration from the fact that if they could put a man on the moon using basically this framework, then certainly you can become known as the go-to in your company or in your field. You have so much talent to share with people and to share with the world. And it's so important that you put that out there and get out there, but it's also important that you be different, be unique, and have a way to really solve problems for people in a sustainable way. So again, if you want to get the details behind this, by all means, go get the book. Here is, I'll take questions in a moment. And also, for any questions we don't get to, you can post them to Huba, or of course, contact me. So Rachel, do we have any questions that anybody wants to cover?
Yes, we had some questions. I'm so excited for your book, by the way. I can't wait to get it. I'm ordering it on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. So the first one I'll read is, and I think it's so relevant for right now, how do you maintain a work-life balance while still being that go-to person?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I face that as well. I have kids. I have teenagers. COVID has been a real challenge for them. Part of it is treating your own family and yourself and your family life like one of your clients, and make them just as important as anything else. And I think some of this is a matter of speed. Do I get things done as quickly as I could if I had no other responsibilities? Of course not. But you can still build a name for yourself. So a lot of this is about being smart in the way you do it. When in the book I talk about the ignite phase, which is where you're trying to really lead a movement out there, and this is where that power broker strategy is super important. And I talk about the specifics of that in the book. But it's about quality, not quantity. And if you keep that focus, and the reason for the framework is to help you streamline your activities so that you can do this more quickly and efficiently than you might otherwise try.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. Okay, so I had another one come up. How does teamwork get incorporated and go side by side with that go-to mindset?
Well, of course, as a team, you can be pursuing this. So it's not just, especially if you're part of a company or part of an organization, you can do this as a team. This is where it's important to have the entire team understand the mission. Have the whole team understand what the moonshot is, have the whole team singing from the same songbook. And in fact, in the book, I offer some stories where, I made the mistake of not getting the whole team on board, and it really stifled our ability to establish ourselves as the go-to, because people weren't talking about the same thing, and people didn't have the same goal and didn't understand, what path we were marching down. So that's super important.
Oh my gosh, great. And so we also had, what could be a couple of things you might want to avoid in your relationships that could hinder you in this process?
Yes. Well, one thing is sometimes people once you start getting a lot of attention, there can be envy and jealousy, and people might start working at cross purposes with you. So one of the ways to avoid that is to keep the message keep everything focused on your message. Keep it focused on the problem and solution. So it's not about you. This isn't about you trying to go make yourself famous and attract a lot of attention for yourself. This is about actually, being a go-to is about having impact out there. So this is not about ego. This is about really going and making a difference. And so if you keep everything focused on that purpose, Kennedy didn't talk about the space program about him personally, like, ooh, I want my name forever associated with taking people to the moon. No, it was about, we need to do this for the good of the free world, for freedom. This is what it's all about. So even with the Apollo space program, they didn't even keep the focus on the US. It was on we want space to be a frontier for free exploration by everybody and not just belong to any one country or any one entity.
I love that. And it's a great unity message to end on. Teresa, thank you so much. Everybody, don't forget to rate us at the end of the session before it's over. And we're really excited. Thank you very much, Teresa.
Thank you
everyone for joining.